Hello, thank you so much, Miriam. It's such a blessing to be here with you and with all of you. And Jet, I wonder if you can make the chat accessible for people for just another few minutes. I know we usually shut it down when we start the meditation, but I wanted to ask you all to put into the chat, if you feel comfortable, where you find a place of refuge. Where is your refuge? When, like there's the famous um, idea, like a refuge from a storm. So when the storms of life come, where do you find refuge? I love the first two that come out are the bed. Yes. Creating art in the woods, nature, garden, beautiful. Keep them coming. So these are places where, like, as soon as I say the word, another related word, this is all coming from this week's Parsha, another related word that we're going to get into is like a sanctuary, a refuge or a sanctuary. Beautiful nature, family, sitting with water, in exercise, in a library, thinking of people who have loved me. Beautiful. Keep them coming. So as you think about these places of refuge in your life, maybe in your own heart, in your own body, like when you're thinking about people or you're bringing yourself into your body, what does it feel like when you're in your refuge? What is happening there for you? So see if you can access a little bit of that right now. Like when you're in your place or space of refuge, how does it feel? What's the experience like? Comfort, calm, feeling, not thinking, quiet peace, great peace and wisdom, lots of peace. I love that list. Calming, safe, shalom, contained, present, letting go, warmth in the heart, gratitude, expansive, presence, beautiful, a rest from anxiety, muscles relaxing, freedom, really beautiful. So you can get there pretty quickly when you just think of this place of refuge and you think of what's happening in the body. So this is very important, and one with the universe, love it, protect it, really beautiful. So in this week's Parsha, we learn about this concept, this idea that they had in this ancient time of cities of refuge. And people were sent there in really tragic, horrible circumstances when when somebody's responsible for the death of another, but without intent. So it might be like an accident, like an accidental death, or there's like a negligent death. There's no desire to harm another, but another was harmed. And then this person needs to be removed from the community and sent to this sanctuary city. And it's basically for their own protection in some ways, because the person who lost the loved one could come after and hurt them, in their heat of pain and grief, anger. And it's also kind of like a mechanism that they could then think about, how do you reintegrate that person? When do they come back? And it could be years that they're living in these sanctuary cities, and it could also not be that long, but it's important. So in the text study that I gave, that I'm going to share just a little piece of, I'll share my screen. Hopefully this works. Okay, do you see the screen okay? Okay, great. So these sanctuary cities were housed, the cities of refuge were they were organized, run by Levites. And the question is why? And the Sefer HaChinuch, which is a 13th century anonymous set of writings about the Torah, provides this reasoning for why the Levites were the ones to run the cities. Since the Levites are men of pure heart who are known for their sterling traits and their venerable wisdom, it is known to all that they will not despise the killer who would be saved by them, and they will not touch him. And even if he would kill one of their loved ones, in other words, they always act with honesty and truth. So that's a huge point here. That the reason why they're set up to run these is because their hearts are so big and so wise that even if the person's there for having accidentally or negligently harmed their own loved one, they will have that openness and they will not harm the person. So it's this force of pure, deep love and care that is the people in charge of these very tragic, painful places of refuge. And the other thing I want to point out is the definition of refuge in both English and Hebrew relate not to what, at least for me, when I think about a refuge, I think of a place away from the rest of my life, or something like a sacred separation from life, which many of you wrote, like, these places away from life, and is true in this case, biblically, literally. But the word itself relates less to this fact that it's separate and more to the fact that it is a place of absorption and integration. It's like the exact opposite, right, of what we think. So the word in both English and Hebrew, miklat in Hebrew, is trying to get us to understand that the purpose of the refuge is the return, is the integration, the connection back. So think about that in relationship to your places of refuge. How do they help you to return back into your life, into the day-to-day, the complications, the stress, the anxiety, etc., with hopefully feeling changed, transformed, deepened, all the things you all wrote, protected? How does that then change the way that you respond in the world and come back to the world, and you integrate that back into your life? And of course, an ultimate point of this practice is that it becomes a refuge for us in the middle of whatever we're doing and in the middle of whatever pain we're experiencing, that we can touch that refuge all the time, or at least a lot of the time, more often than the times we're able to get away on vacation or to see the right person that will bring us that calm and peace, or even to go out into nature, that we might be able to hold on to it or to touch it, to remember it, to bring it back into our bodies when we're struggling. And so let's practice now, hopefully getting just that little taste, that delicious taste of that refuge that you all spoke about so beautifully in the chat. So I want to invite you to come to a comfortable position, to relax your shoulders, soften your jaw. You can sit, you can lay down, you can close your eyes, you can keep them softly focused in front of you. Taking a few deep breaths to settle, to open, and to arrive. So as we find this inner place of refuge as we sit, can you imagine your inner Levite, the one that holds all of you, the the mistakes you've made, the places of shame, pain. Can you imagine there being that love and that holding presence within you that can hold it all, that makes space for all of it? Places of fear, resistance, all of it lovingly held in this inner refuge. Can release and soften thoughts, planning. Just come back to this moment, to the softness, the ease of this breath, this moment of aliveness. This sense of being held. Allowing any feelings to wash through you. Returning again and again. Thoughts will keep thinking. That is what thoughts do. Every time you notice you're lost, you can imagine yourself just softening back into this body, to this moment. Imagining a force field of love, of bottomless forgiveness, of shalem, wholeness, right in this moment. As we prepare to re-enter the rest of our day from this momentary place of refuge, perhaps you want to set an intention to bring with you, to integrate the truth, the love that you find here, so that it bleeds out into the rest of your day and week and life. You can breathe in that intention and imagine it moving through your whole body, through each cell, becoming a part of you and becoming a part of the next unfolding moment. Thank you all so much for practicing together today.
Thank you so much, Yael. Wow. A beautiful, deep, and rich miklat in time and space. Thank you. We'll have time in just a few moments for those of you who can stay with us for some questions and conversation. First, we move into the mourner's Kaddish. And if Jet, you can place that on our screen. We're welcome. Each of us now will have a chance as we like. If you'd like to stand, we can unmute. And anyone who is saying Kaddish for someone, if it's a year of mourning, if it's a yard site, please drop their names into the chat and share with us for whom you're saying Kaddish. And I'll stand. Anybody who would like and is able to stand in body or in spirit. And again, we can say together, Mourner's Kaddish. Yikadal,
Yikadal, Yikadash,
Isman Karim, Shalom Aleichem, Barak Ishabah, Kadar Shlama Rabba Mishamaya Kol Yisrael Amen. Say shalom Yilma
Shalom.
Shalom Aleinu Yisrael Kol Yoshvei Tevel
Amen.
Amen.
I want to have you go
Amen.
your swim.
Thank you, everybody, for being with us today. If you're able to stay, so encourage, welcome your participation for the next 15 minutes together. Of course, I'll remind us, if you're able to contribute in some financial way to these daily sits, please feel welcome to do that, and also know of any amount, and know that your presence is itself, it's why we're here. It's who we're here for. It makes this possible. So your participation is sacred contribution. Lastly, before those of us who can't stay part ways, wanted to again remind you of the upcoming retreat on August 27th that Yael will be leading. Now that we've had today's taste of your gift for leading and guiding this kind of space, Yael, I know I, for one, am going to be looking at my calendar truly to see if I can join a day-long retreat entitled, that beautiful title, Great Love and Clear Understanding. So check out the details. And again, thank you, Yael, for this beautiful sit today, teaching and during these 3 weeks of consolation leading to Tisha B'Av. And thank you, everybody, for joining us today. And also thank you, Jet, behind the scenes for your agile and seamless tech facilitation. Greatly appreciated. So with that, I'm going to turn to our conversation, Yael, and want to invite folks, if you have a question, to put it in the chat or a comment. And I see one already from Steve. I'd like to ask, before Steve, we share your question, with your indulgence, Yael, I have just a reflection to offer. I was so struck by the wisdom teaching that refuge in this aspect, or in this way that it's being offered and served up in this parsha, and as you highlighted, is not to be found out separate from our lives. While we can find refuge in places of retreat, and we know the importance of that. Also, and as you pointed out, most often we're not retreating. We're in the midst, betoch, our lives. And so as you lifted up this awareness of the city, not the midbar, the desert, but the city, the place of community gathering, and that miklat, that refuge aspect of these cities. Just struck by, wow, the chatter in our minds, like the cities in our minds, and all the voices and components in the mind, and it's right here that this is one way, this practice, to help us draw down into and like dwell in this miklat, this refuge right here, as a way towards integration, as you said.
Yeah.
I wondered if you had any more to reflect about that you'd like to share, or how that's maybe a different aspect of that to bring out, or further nuance or something. And then we'll move into Steve and anyone else who has questions for us.
Well, I just love how you just framed it, that the kind of juxtaposition of the city versus the wilderness, the midbar. And this is also the end of a book, the whole book of Numbers. This is our last, moment of that book. Granted, Deuteronomy still talks a lot about the desert, and we're not done with the desert yet, but we're kind of like setting as a people, like the vision for how are we going to live in community, and real community, not just this traveling community that we've been stuck with for the last 40 years. So I think that's such an important point and such an important moment. And like everything exists in, I think, Adrienne Marie Brown talks about how things exist in a fractal. So how we are in the community and how we are inside are not two separate things. And so similarly, how we are inside and how we are in the community are not two separate things. So this is inner work that we have to do to bring these places of refuge and compassionate refuge. Like that Levite point, I think, is such an important one, that they're not sent to these cities in exile, and they're not sent to beat themselves up. Like they're sent housed with love and care. And that's what we have to do for ourselves. And then similarly, like that ripple out into the community. So yeah, it's fascinating to me.
Thank you. Fascinating. And oh my gosh, how relevant today. How relevant. So Steve asks, thank you so much, Yael. Do you have any thoughts about the similarity between the biblical cities of refuge and the Hawaiian sanctuary cities, also overseen by priests that served a similar purpose, two geographically distant cultures developing a very similar ritual? Interesting.
Yes, so interesting. I know nothing about that, but thanks for letting us know about it.
Also, agreed. Don't know. How interesting. Thank you, Steve. Lori asks, comments and asks, during today's beautiful sit, I had the idea that it would be so helpful to move times and people in conflict into shared refuge, a softened place of unconditional love and truth. How might we invite or hold another person or people into refuge in the middle of a conflict, even if the invitation is silent?
That gave me the chills. That's beautiful. What a beautiful point.
Do you have thoughts about that, Yael, about how, as you invited us in, I'm thinking in a sense, the sort of the blessing practice, metta practice. Could that be a way to invite, even in the midst of conflict, interpersonal, to invite this in sort of an inner move as you're moving into your miklat?
Beautiful. Yes. Yeah. I'm sorry. I didn't fully realize that was a question. I thought it was just, let's think about it. No, that is perfect. That is a beautiful way, like interiorly. So I was thinking you were actually speaking about physically moving people, like refugees, which guess what? We have plenty of and could really use a place of safety, which they so rarely get. But yes, on an internal level, if you're in the middle of a conflict with someone, or, you're having so much struggle, the blessing practice, the practice of wishing people well and that they might find ease, and yourself. Because if you're in the middle of that conflict, you are also needing those wishes and that compassion and that care for yourself too. Sometimes I think in order to authentically wish it for someone else, you kind of have to start with yourself. Otherwise, it's just like, may they feel fine. It doesn't really work in my experience that well. And so, yeah, I think that's such a good point, Miriam. Like that practice of wishing people, of doing that blessing practice, that metta practice in the Buddhist world is so powerful for exactly that.
Yeah. So how about, and basing it on a question from Rina Shekhinah, what about when we're seeking refuge in states of physical pain? Expanding, softening, releasing, they writes, non-attaching, loving kindness, and meditating.
Mm.
That physical pain.
Yeah. So difficult, and so difficult to find refuge in the body when the body's in pain. Sometimes not even wise, like sometimes if by putting attention on it, it's activating, or it's difficult it's overwhelming, then you want to find where's your refuge that does calm, that does bring you some sense of stability and calmness, some sense of holding. So if the pain is happening in the body, physical or emotional, and it's too much, then go to something like maybe the bottoms of your feet. Maybe everybody's different. Maybe it's just sounds, maybe it's beautiful smells, or looking at something beautiful like nature. Try and engage a sense that is not, that you're not facing that overwhelm or that, excruciating pain, because life is hard enough anyway. If it feels okay to do so and you want to soften the area, because you mentioned softening in this, Rena, like the area around the pain, like how far out can you go where it's not directly activating the pain, but it's also not, but it's actually supportive or helpful. And if there's some way to do that, to soften around, to give yourself a soft enough landing spot, then that can be your refuge, and that can really help.
So what is so wise? I sometimes find also forgiveness for myself when I can't do that is like that softens. If I like
Yes.
tightening around that and the desire to bring that practice and just can't, and it's so painful. And okay, that Sylvia Boorstein move that many of us have, right? Okay, sweetheart. Okay, doing the best I can.
Yes, I love that.
Okay, I see that Esther has your hand raised. Esther, I'm just going to ask you, is it possible to put your question in the chat, or do you feel, because I think that's my guidance from Mark Margolius, our beloved cruise director here, is that's the media we're aiming towards. If not, I'll come back to you and we'll deviate a little bit here. Y'all can report back to Mark that we're doing that. But I want to lift up Michael's question first. It's a hard one, at least as and it also speaks to something today, relevant today. How can one communicate with those who would use violence to uphold their beliefs? Is it possible to persuade, I'm assuming, for example, settlers to give up their interpretation of Torah? So when there are seemingly such at odds, and when those odds are having violent implication, violence is rendered thought-wise, emotionally in the world, can this practice and can communication, what can we bring to bear here?
Yeah.
How might this practice help?
I think there's kind of like two different levels of that question. There's what's happening inside of us vis-a-vis this other person, and what's happening in the actual world. Inside of us, there's a lot of room to try very hard to find spaces of curiosity, of openness, even though we might feel justified rage and anger and lots of other, very justifiable feelings, fear, then holding open the possibility of care for human beings who are twisted up, like are experiencing pain and causing pain to others, is like, it's the work of a lifetime. But I think it's so important for us to not shut down in the face of that, and to not kind of cast people as evil or bad, which then just perpetuates the cycle. And it's bad for us. It's not healthy.
For us, that's our practice to hold towards that alignment of
Exactly.
emotionally, spiritually, and the work of a lifetime.
And then there's the outer work, which is critical. That's this work of moving towards what we believed and we know in our hearts or feel is like justice. And that is also the work of a lifetime. And those two things are not they're not disconnected, because how you're holding, your, what is, Valerie Carr is an amazing activist and writer, and she talks about people as opponents, not enemies, but opponents, people who are, in direct opposition to what you're hoping to accomplish. And she says, like, you got to fight. There's times and moments that you must move forward to try and change systems, but it's going to completely change how you approach those moments if the inner work is there, that are holding that person with sacredness inside of you. So those two movements are important. And then if you're talking about, like, can you convince someone who's dead set against you? Probably not. I mean, as an individual, that seems like wasted energy. So I think I would rather spend the energy in a different kind of a way.
And Cheryl wrote, in the context where this is possible, that a place of refuge can be restorative justice circles, an amazing practice for healing in and with community. That's a little bit different. That's when it's possible to set those up, right?
Right.
But yes, the way in which both practices interrelate. Esther, in our final minute, I did promise. Can we allow Esther to unmute?
I don't want to take a lot of time because you're doing something so gracious, because I wasn't able to type. But I just wanted to say that I'm trying to make a circle with my hands, my fingers, because yesterday I learned from His Holiness, the Dalai Lama, that compassion is a circle. We start with ourselves and go to the next person, and back to ourselves. And he did it with his hands.
So beautiful.
Thank you so much, Esther. And what a beautiful mudra, hand gesture to seal our time together today, and in our practice and learning with you, Yael. Thank you so much for sharing your wisdom and your generous heart, your inner space of refuge that has created this sanctuary space. I feel like, since others may as well, together today. Thank you, everybody, again, and thank you, Jet. We will be back here tomorrow at the same time, same makom, same place of refuge, 12:30 Eastern. Again, thank you, Yael, and thank you, Jet. Thank you, everyone, so much for being here, and have a beautiful rest of your day. Thank you. Bye, everybody.